Have you ever found yourself wondering, with a slight tremor of existential dread, what exactly comes next in the grand, chaotic circus of your life? A new job, a new love, or perhaps just what you're having for dinner tonight? It's a question that has haunted humanity since the dawn of consciousness. An innate craving to peer through the misty veil of tomorrow. And to satisfy this craving, we've invented all sorts of wonderfully bizarre methods. From enigmatic tarot cards, glistening crystal balls, to the vague pronouncements of self-proclaimed psychics, we've clung to superstitious theatrics, with built-on blind faith and a dash of convenient coincidence. But what if there was another way? A field that doesn't rely on magic spells or the whispers of destiny, but rather on cold, hard numbers, dispassionate data, and a power few truly grasp. A tool that allows us not just to predict, but to shape our future. That, my friends, with his probability and statistics. Sounds dry, you say. Perhaps, but trust me, the story of how these numbers came to be is far more entertaining than any tarot spread. The fascinating irony is that the foundation of this precise science began with games of chance, high stakes, and questionable decisions. Like the simple flip of a coin, heads or tails, the roll of a die, revealing one of its 6 faces, or the draw of a card from a shuffled, mysterious deck. It was from these seemingly trivial pastimes that great minds began to ask profound questions. They learned to calculate possibilities, to discern the hidden patterns behind apparent randomness, and step by step, transformed mere luck into verifiable knowledge. Today, probability in statistics is no longer confined to the dusty halls of academia. It has become the indispensable guide for countless professions and fields. Meteorologists use it to predict the weather, with letting us know when to grab an umbrella or when to just stay home and curse the clouds. Quantum physicists need it to decipher the enigmatic subatomic world, where everything is a probability, not a certainty. With social policymakers rely on it to make decisions that can impact millions, hopefully for the better, but often with unintended, statistically significant consequences. Wherever there is data, there is probability and statistics, helping us analyze, predict, and make smarter, less emotionally driven choices. This isn't just a math lesson. This is a life lesson, a tool to cut through illusions and face reality, however inconvenient it may be. Where randomness is demystified, and the future is no longer just a wild guess, but a series of probabilities that can be calculated, understood, and even leveraged. So, let's step through the looking glass into the world of probability and statistics. Albert Einstein once famously stated that we could predict everything in the universe, provided we had all the necessary information. Now, this statement has been proven delightfully incorrect at the quantum level, where true randomness reigns supreme. But in the macro world of large objects, of our everyday lives, it still holds theoretically true. We could predict everything from the weather, the likelihood of someone finding true love, the trajectory of a single life, or even the fate of this entire planet. If only we had all the data. Currently, however, we don't possess enough data to predict complex things like, say, the future of your love life with absolute certainty. Therefore, aside from cheap, superstitious parlor tricks and professional charlatans with their well-rehearsed cons, to this day, there are no truly reliable models capable of making such predictions with an acceptable degree of accuracy. So, fundamentally, we live in a deterministic world. This philosophical school of thought posits that all events are ultimately determined by prior causes and are thus inevitable, which is why everything often feels so elusive, so risky, and so utterly uncertain. Yet, not everything is quite so uncertain. Some things have slowly, painstakingly, come within humanity's grasp, thanks to the relentless march of science. More specifically, through probability and statistics. This mathematical marvel is slowly transforming humanity into its own oracle, allowing us to grasp our destinies with greater clarity and, dare I say, cold, hard logic. We've learned to forecast the future in myriad domains. And, perhaps more importantly, we've learned what we might experience and what we will, with crushing statistical likelihood, miss out on. This allows us to make educated decisions rather than simply stumbling through life on instinct, like the rest of the animal kingdom. So, what exactly is probability, and what glorious pitfalls should we avoid when discussing it? When the word probability is uttered, most people immediately conjure images of dice, coin flips, or card draws. Not merely because they're easy to illustrate, but because the very genesis of probability theory sprang from the fervent study of gambling games. Desperate gamblers and shrewd mathematicians alike racked their brains, not for philosophical enlightenment, but for a scientific edge to beat the house, and thus probability was born, a testament to human greed and ingenuity. At its core, the probability signifies the likelihood of an event occurring, expressed as a number between 0 and 1. Where 0 means utterly impossible, a cosmic joke, and 1 means absolutely certain, as inevitable as death and taxes. Anywhere between 0 and 1, the higher the number, the more likely the event is to grace us with its presence, and vice versa. When you flip a coin, there are only two possible outcomes, heads or tails. When you roll a six-sided die, the result can be any number from 1 to 6. This maximum number of possible outcomes is charmingly called the sample space. Each individual outcome, heads, tails, or a specific number on the die, is an event. And because we can't predict the outcome beforehand, unless you're a magician or cheating, they're dubbed random events. Given that most coins aren't excessively thick, the probability of it landing perfectly on its edge, being both heads and tails, is practically 0, an impossible event for all intents and purposes. Conversely, with a die numbered 1 to 6, you will always roll a number less than 7, because that, my friends, is a certain event. With only two sides, the probability of a coin landing on heads or tails is an equal 1.2 or 50%. However, with a sample space of 6 possibilities, the probability of any single face appearing on a die is a mere 1.6. Clearly, predicting the outcome of a coin toss is statistically easier than predicting a specific number on a die roll. Now, we all know that most things in life are far more complex than a simple coin or a die. Yet humans, with being the optimists, elves or fools that we are, still love to guess. But there are a few crucial caveats, a few delightful traps our brains consistently fall into. A probability of 1/2 or 106 doesn't mean that if your coin lands on heads the first time, the next flip is guaranteed to be tails. Nor does it mean that if you roll a die 6 times, you'll magically see all 6 faces appear. This number is merely a prediction, a statistical whisper telling us the likelihood of each outcome in any given trial. You could absolutely flip a coin 4 times and get 3 heads. Or, perhaps more relatable, you could be driven to the brink of madness in a game of Ludo, desperately trying to roll a 1 or a 6 to get your horse out of the stable, with only to be denied by the cruel hand of randomness. In the short term, streaks of identical events are perfectly plausible, even common. This short-term ratio is what we call frequency. Probability, however, is the long-term ratio, a value that gradually, inexorably, converges to its predicted true value over an infinite number of trials. For example, when we say there's a 132 chance of a coin landing heads, it's because after an enormous number of flips, that's precisely the ratio you'll observe. Regardless of whether your first 10 flips were all heads, much to your betting partner's chagrin. But 10 heads in a row isn't exactly a common occurrence. And this brings us to another subtle, yet crucial, point in probability. Even if you flipped 9 consecutive heads, with the probability of the 10th flip also being heads remains a steadfast 1/2, just like the previous 9. The crucial distinction lies in the probability of that specific sequence occurring 10 consecutive heads. That's 1/2 to the power of 10, or roughly 0.001. Furthermore, the true complexity of probability unfurls when we introduce conditions to the mix. The probability of getting X heads and Y flips is vastly different from getting X consecutive heads within those same Y flips. We also need to consider how one event's occurrence can delightfully or disastrously alter the probabilities of subsequent events. For instance, if you draw a red card from a standard deck, the initial 20-60-26 red-black ratio immediately shifts to 20-50-26, thus decreasing the probability of drawing another red card, much to the chagrin of card sharks everywhere. The more variables you toss into the probabilistic stew, the exponentially more complex the calculations become. One must painstakingly determine if these variables are playing nice and influencing each other, or if they're perfectly independent, blissfully unaware. And the ultimate challenge: exhaustively listing every single variable, every conceivable possibility, before the universe throws a new, unexpected curveball. To summarize the glorious complexities of probability, here are a few fundamental truths. Holding a six-sided die, you will never, ever roll a seventh side. What can happen, this will happen. What if cannot happen, never will. The probability of rolling a 1 on a die is 106, meaning if you roll it 100 times, you'll get 1 roughly 16 times, 1,000 times about 166 times. And if you roll it an infinite number of times, you will get 1, exactly 1/6 of the time. What can happen a certain number of times, it will happen that exact number of times, if given enough opportunities. If you roll a 1 on your first toss, the very next toss still has a 1,006 chance of being a 1. Simply put, but the first roll has absolutely no bearing on the second. When one event couldn't care less about another, they are independent. However, the probability of rolling 2 consecutive A1s is a much lower 40-36, because unlike the previous point, here we're calculating the probability of a specific sequence, not just a single event. In a card game, if you draw a red card, the probability of your next card being black actually increases. Because when you remove an item, the composition of the remaining environment changes, making other outcomes more or less likely. The more events you string together, the problem's complexity escalates exponentially, turning simple calculations into a mathematician's nightmare. Statistics is a more intricate beast, but can be broadly understood as the scientific method of collecting, analyzing, interpreting, presenting, and organizing data. For instance, one might compile a colorful table charting the number of heads in 100 coin flips, or, the more controversially, the number of people whose names begin with the letter D, who suffer from depression. The primary goal of statistics is often to generate hypotheses from the data collected. Like observing a statistical anomaly where individuals with unusual names exhibit higher rates of mental health issues, leading to the hypothesis that rare names might impact a child's psychological well-being later in life. However, not all data points are romantically linked in a causal relationship. Take, for instance, the data showing that an increase in ice cream sales perfectly correlates with a rise in drowning deaths. This doesn't mean ice cream is a nefarious aquatic assassin. The true culprit, of course, is summer vacation, when children swim and eat more ice cream. Conversely, sometimes things that seem utterly unrelated are, in fact, deeply intertwined, like the curious case of increased TV and cable ownership in India, which correlated with better population control than traditional contraceptives. Statistics teaches us many things, often uncomfortable truths. For instance, with traffic accident data unequivocally demonstrates that flying is statistically far safer than driving a car, even though our gut instinct screams that hurtling through the air in a metal tube at 30,000 feet is inherently more terrifying and thus riskier. Statistics helps us unveil the cold, hard facts, truths that have long been buried beneath the flimsy foundations of common intuition. So, why should you, a discerning individual, bother understanding probability and statistics? Firstly, to avoid being perpetually fleeced, bamboozled, and utterly ripped off. You shouldn't buy lottery tickets, because the odds are so astronomically, insultingly low, it's not even worth the fleeting fantasy. you shouldn't frequent casinos because every game is meticulously designed with a house edgy, ensuring that with every spin, every hand, every roll, you're statistically guaranteed to lose a tiny percentage of your wager. Win or lose, the house always, with Eilers, always wins in the long run. The more you play, the closer you creep to the mathematical certainty of your financial demise. And you definitely shouldn't bet, because bookmakers are statistical masterminds with crafting odds so that your potential winnings never quite offset your potential losses, always with a juicy commission shaved off for their troubles. Yet, these enticing traps persist, largely due to their high-risk, high-reward allure. And we, in our infinite human hubris, always believe that the odds will miraculously bend for us. That if there's 1 in a million chance of striking it rich, that 1 in a million is surely me. If I were to offer a single, cynical piece of advice, if you must gamble, do it once, and then stop. Regardless of whether you win or lose, and only if you possess the superhuman self-control of a stoic monk. Conversely, safer investment channels offer pitifully low returns. They won't make you rich overnight, and are only truly beneficial for those already blessed with abundant wealth, endless time, and saintly patience. Think banks, insurance, or stable index funds. They demand massive capital and decades of commitment for any noticeable return. Of course, you are free to choose your own life strategy, your own preferred method of financial self-immolation. But be warned, this is not a game you can restart. Every agonizing loss, every crushing regret, will be felt directly, personally. Secondly, embrace probability and statistics to make safer, smarter, and less regrettable life decisions. Beyond the realms of money, investments, and gambling, probability and statistics illuminate the optimal paths for myriad life choices. For example, if data consistently shows that pursuing higher education statistically correlates with higher lifetime earnings, then you can confidently choose that path, or perhaps choose the opposite if the data suggests otherwise. Listening to data, and understanding how to analyze it, is infinitely more valuable than any life-changing advice from a million-view vlogger on YouTube, because vloggers, bless their hearts, are often masters of rhetoric, not necessarily masters of accuracy. Over the years, the relentless march of data science has bestowed upon us an embarrassment of information. Understand this: virtually every major organization, governments, corporations, global enterprises, operates not on gut feelings or ancient prophecies, but on cold, hard data analyzed by brilliant data scientists. They don't consult soothsayers or shamans, unlike our ancestors thousands of years ago. For the average individual, with access to and processing power for this deluge of information is still limited. However, popular science, distilled from these same principles, offers invaluable probabilistic advice for finding love, choosing a career, and much more. These are the insights you should seek and pursue, rather than the nebulous pronouncements of palm readers, physiognomists, or astrologers. Finally, probability and statistics will teach you that luck is nothing special. And crucially, it will help you gracefully accept a life brimming with delightful, infuriating uncertainty. Yes, good fortune exists, but it's merely the rare, advantageous occurrence of a low probability event. Sometimes, a statistical anomaly will swing in your favor, and you'll experience a fleeting moment of luck. But this luck is inherently random, unpredictable, and unreplicable, making it a poor foundation for any serious life strategy. What is worth noting, however, is consistently positioning yourself in situations where luck is entirely optional. For example, you'll need a hefty dose of luck to get hired if you possess mediocre skills and a resume as bare as a desert landscape. But you won't need luck if you diligently develop yourself and statistically place yourself in the top 80% of qualified candidates. The fundamental flaw of those who perpetually chase luck is a profound misunderstanding of basic mathematics. In a long, complex life, filled with countless decisions, the longer you live and the more choices you make, the more you will, by sheer statistical inevitability, encounter bad luck. Despite the phenomenal advancements in data science and the tireless assistance of supercomputers, we are still far from predicting everything. Thus, a significant portion of complex human endeavors still demands intuition, gut feelings, and a healthy dose of calculated risk. Perhaps, hidden deep within decisions made by the heart, lies a rationality too subtle for mere numbers to grasp. Perhaps. But critically, risk should only be embraced for events that are genuinely unpredictable, where no amount of data can give you an edge. Like betting on the exact moment gold prices will surge, not on buying a lottery ticket when you already know you've statistically lost. The macro applications of probability and statistics. As early as the 17th century, this pragmatic science became an indispensable tool for state governance and social management, from meticulously counting populations and managing burgeoning economies to controlling and preventing devastating epidemics. Quantitative statistical data played a colossal political role, particularly in monitoring and formulating management policies across European nations during that era. These statistical figures not only illuminated past events, but also became powerful crystal balls for predicting future occurrences. By meticulously observing variables, discerning their intricate relationships, and thus forecasting the likelihood of specific future events. Weather forecasting, for instance, is essentially a colossal data gathering operation, meticulously collecting atmospheric conditions like temperature, humidity, and wind speed. These mountains of data are then fed into complex meteorological models. From this alchemical process, experts can ascertain the likely shifts and probabilities of various weather phenomena in the immediate future. In fields like biology or quantum physics, probability theory plays an immense role in predicting the segregation of traits or the probable location of subatomic particles. Even in quantum physics, the exact position of an electron remains frustratingly indeterminate. Yet, the inherent randomness at the micro level doesn't necessarily translate to chaos at the macro level. Because large objects, composed of countless particles, tend to average out their quantum eccentricities, becoming far more predictable. So, we've come a long way from tarot cards and glistening crystal balls. From vague pronouncements to cold, hard numbers that hold immense, undeniable power. Probability in statistics doesn't promise a perfectly certain future. Instead, it equips us with the tools to better understand what might happen, what risks to meticulously avoid, and what opportunities to ruthlessly seize. It is the science of uncertainty, a brutally honest companion in a chaotic world. Use it to make better decisions, to live a more informed life, rather than blindly surrendering to fate or the baseless prophecies of charlatans. Because, ultimately, the future isn't revealed. It's built, one calculated probability at a time. If this journey into the cold, hard truths of existence resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more insightful content on life, science, and the delightful absurdity of human nature. And don't forget to share your own statistically significant thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and may your future probabilities always be in your favor!